might have to. So we have classical conditioning, and then we have the other side, operant conditioning. Over here, classical conditioning, you learn that it's always what? It is a process of stimulus which will lead to a response. But if you break this word down, you realize that the stimulus, all right, is really, okay, let's maintain the word. This is usually unique by itself, so can understand. So this is actually, in layman's term, they will also call it a stimulus, whereas a response is actually your behavior, right? This is actually behavior, a behavioral response. Maybe you run away. Maybe you start to cringe in fear. But you look at operant conditioning. What they tell you is in operant conditioning, there is a behavior followed by a consequence. The consequence meaning you either provide the reinforcer or the punisher, right? So there is behavior followed by consequence. But if you look at this, consequence is actually the stimulus. And behavior, of course, behavior. You notice it's actually a reverse process. Classical conditioning and operant conditioning, they are simply talking about a process, all right, but in opposite direction. So the process of learning, all right, when it's flipped, when it's originally seen as something, some energy, something that has changed in the environment to a behavior, when you flip it around, it describes the learning criteria of using external environment to accelerate or decelerate the learning, which is operant conditioning. Okay, so in this case, right, we have both sides of the same coin. Same coin meaning what? The coin called conditioning or learning. With this, it's complete, almost. In those days, they think that it's complete. Actually, there is a third principle of learning. So we have now covered out of 3 principles of learning, we have covered 2 of them. You either learn things reflexively because you receive some kind of signal from the environment and you behave in a certain way, or you decided that you want to manipulate the environment in order to achieve some objective, right? You want to operate and you do so, and that ends up with a certain change on the environment, which will still give you the feedback that, okay, it is done correctly or not so correctly. Got it?
Sorry, Mr. Lam, I'm a bit confused here. So the example you gave about the dog and the bell, that falls under classic conditioning.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example under operant conditioning? Something like this.
So the dog, all right. So initially we have the dog salivating more because it sees let's say the bell ring. Now maybe you want the dog to signal, all right. So if the dog then decided, because let's say the dog could roam around in the lab, it's not inside a cage. The dog may signal by what? By running to the bell and hit it so that it goes a ring. So and whenever you do that, you realize that the dog is trying to signal to me, and you then come to him with food. So you have actually changed this. The dog initially learned that the bell is a signal for the food. All right, so ring ring, it salivates. But it also induces it to become hungrier. So it behaves in a certain food searching or food craving kind of manner. And later on its own, it's hungry, it decided that I will manipulate. So it went to play with the bell, deliberately ringing it. But if you don't care about it, right, it would then realize that it only works one way. So it would decide to just leave the toy alone. But if you start to play with the toy, which is the bell, and you start to give it food, a reinforcer, the whole thing will burn in now. The dog will now understand that this thing is a signal of food, and I can also use it to signal the coming of food, completing the whole process. Yes?
To add on to last week talking about dog, actually I have a dog of mine also. So regarding these 2 methods of conditioning and all things, is where SA and police, the dog you need how to train the dog. Can you apply this conditioning
So of course they don't wait for the dog to show something. It's too tedious. What they do is all those canine units, right? The dog units. What they do is they will just straight away go into this. All right. So for example, they let the dog sniff some drug substance, heroin. Every time they give you heroin, they give you food. Give heroin, give food. They don't let the dog ingest the heroin. They only let the dog sniff the heroin. Then they give food. So now the dog realizes that heroin is, if I find heroin, I will find something I like. But the dog doesn't know that heroin is poisonous. It had never been injected before. All it knew was that this is the thing that gives me food. But the dog is not stupid. After some time, actually, now nobody has proven this yet, but we look at the animal's behavior, we realize that they get excited about things too. So they are not just simply a stone recipient of like a programming order. I sniff this out, then great. After that, right, they very excitedly, so suppose you are a trainer, you walk far away, and then there's some hidden drug in a car there. So you want to, okay, so let's say I'm walking to this place. So suppose I'm going to this place and there is drug hidden in here. So you cannot see it, all right? But we got news that there is some kind of drug here. Then there is a car parked at the side, which also has drug. Now I may be leading my dog to here, but the dog, right, would very excitedly also sniff that something is there. Then he will start to grab my attention. Okay? So the dog is now totally operating on what? This thing has sunken in. It now knows that this is not just food, but it is something that my so-called master and my handler wants it. And they use a lot to communicate this across. So you may not be targeting that, but your dog would try to communicate with you. Okay? So now it's a more complex relationship now. The dog actually communicates. And this is just a simple scenario. You look at all those rescue dogs, you find that they actually do a lot of this kind of communication. In peacetime, they will like be playing. Or during training, they will also treat it like it's fun. And in real life, they will actually be what? They would really be doing like, they think that this is a fun activity. Yeah.
Listening to the command of the dog handler, is it the same thing to apply?
Yeah, so they actually do a lot of variety of conditioning in order to improve the communication, improve the search and target operation, all these sort of things. What you are learning, of course, is just the overall concept. So we are looking only at one thing. In real life, we have to implement many things so that there is to the handler, it's like, oh, so that our rapport is good. But that is really what you are letting the dog learn to communicate, to express its feelings, and then there is going to be more cooperation. Okay? Question? So these are powerful learning which cuts across humanity into animal kingdom. All right? And by today's standards, we realize that insects also can think maybe in a very simple way. Yeah.
It's like indoctrination.
Indoctrination, yeah, something like that. Yes. Okay, question? So of course they will tell you it's brainwashing, indoctrination. For those what? Come again?
Before the game, they do a cheer.
Yeah.
So
it's to prepare you to become more aroused. You see, when you're playing games, you need more energy. Energy comes from two ways. One is the food you ingest, converts to energy. But the other comes from your nervous firing. So when you are all excited, right, you actually have a boost to your energy. All right, if you have eaten well, then no problem. Your body will draw more energy from the stored sources and have it out at one burst. Yeah. So the conditioning can be made to be very subtle. You can even control to a certain extent physiological processes. That's why sometimes people train themselves to what? In special forces, they may train themselves to endure certain things that normal people cannot. How they do it is they keep, but sometimes they focus on imagining the reward at the end, and they do it until they are like zombified kind of thing. But that's how they push themselves. Now, why are these people able to withstand harsh training, all this? Because one of those things is they train themselves to do two things. One is regulate their breathing. all right, so that they can distract their minds. The other one is actually what you say, they imagine the reward ahead of time and they keep focusing on that. Okay, most people will, when you have to study for the exam, you sit there 3 hours, why am I doing this, right? But the special forces person will think, wow, imagine I score #1 in class. Then they will just do it. All right. So then you say that crazy, I got score #1. You think so easy? I get only one #1. But that's what they do.
I think the Ukraine soldier and the citizen are
That one I don't know. Okay, I can't speak for them.
So is it right to say that
Yeah.
classic conditioning can also lead to operative conditioning?
Lead to is not a good word. Lead to suggests that you have to have one process first before the other. It doesn't work this way.
So
If you look at the dogs, right, they can just straight away come in the middle and train the dogs. So these two processes, they describe learning processes. They don't have to be consequentially happening. All right, it's literally, if you take out the third principle, which you have not learned, it's literally two sides of the same coin. You can't say the head side makes the tail side occur, right? Because when you take any coin, you will always have both sides. You don't have to recognize one side before you recognize the other side. All right, can I move on? Okay, so all right, this is for you to read. It's lengthy. Let me summarize it. What it's saying is that conditioning doesn't just work like how you learned it just now, like it's all very pure form. You give, then the person will react. Sometimes, right, our learning is such that we generalize the learning. Like what? Like a person who was robbed. So he was going home. He always has to pass by this particular dark alley and was robbed. But because the stimulus is so strong, the person now becomes afraid of all dark alleys in Singapore, right? So the learning has become widened. Meaning inside we start to what? Initially we learn to attach to one specific concept, but if you give it a lot of energy, all right, or stimulation, it may actually start to link up with all relevant concepts. Like dark alleys are all fearful, rather than I was unlucky enough to be robbed at that alley which I have to go through or walk past to reach home. Okay, so this kind of extending to any relevant, you're extending your learning process, right, to rope in anything that is relevant, semi-relevant, is called generalization, the process of generalization. And it is useful. Why? Because then we don't have to keep learning about certain things. Like if you look at in Ukraine, then they may have learned that a bit of noise, it's dangerous, so we should take cover. But after that, that sound need not be some ordnance exploding away. But the thing is, if you become if you have learned to generalize any strange sound is danger, you probably will run away first. Therefore, surviving rather than accidentally dying, right? So we don't have to so you see, bomb explosion, car crash, all right, maybe some people are just robbing another person. These are all threats. But if you have to go through every situation, right, you probably will die along the way. But if you generalize, then you will start to escape. All right? So generalization is important. Sometimes when we assess the threat and we feel that, this is not so straightforward, we will start to link up with relevant concepts. So conditioning is actually wider. It doesn't mean that you have to always condition the organism with a specific procedure. For humans, we have an extra tool compared to maybe say animals. We can describe relevant signals, all right, with language. So if you are teaching a dog, maybe you have to scare the dog through different kinds of loud noise. Maybe you blast the horn, you do a loud siren, and then now they will realize that all loud noises are dangerous. Okay, you have to do different things. But for humans, right, maybe you do once, then you tell the child, suppose the child is old enough, not say like 3, 4 years old, they cannot understand language. So you tell the child, remember, loud noise, you run. So you only need to do it once, and now if they go out to forage for food, they will run when they hear loud noises. So talking, it's our tool. All right, we have an advantage over other organisms. It's not that they don't have such things, but it's rather limited. Like if you look at fishes, so fishes, right, in danger, once a fish is caught, it will secrete some kind of pheromones from itself. You can almost imagine like the fish is crying, but it's not crying through its eyes, it's crying all over its body. So this sort of tears, this pheromones is released, so the surrounding fishes all become afraid. And next time, right, if they feel that there's something strange, they will all swim away. Okay, so they also have a signal, but the signal it's sometimes used in an exaggerated way, or it could be a false alarm. Language has a lot of varying intonations, which allow us to categorize, to sharpen it. But the use of pheromones, some kind of bodily chemicals, all right, they release some kind of like smell, these kind of things. It doesn't have enough variation to make learning specific. Okay? Yeah.
May I know if these two conditioning methods somehow justify capital and or bodily punishment?
Come again? Justify what?
Justify capital and or bodily punishment.
Justify. Okay, wait. Can you read to the class the question?
Sure. Okay. May I know if these two conditioning methods somehow justify capital and or bodily punishment?
Personally, I think it is a bit too. There are a lot of things missing. Meaning, you are looking at the consequence of a very heavy punishment. All right, like it's a consequence. Now, and furthermore, I do not know what it means by justifying. If you are asking that whether this can eventually lead someone to learn something, and then they do something which warrants capital punishment, well, that depends on what is the action. So suppose, right, they are conditioned to deliver drugs, and they deliberately deliver drugs for personal profit. All right, at the expense of causing harm to people, then obviously some people will argue that yes, it's justifiable. All right, you have learned and you did not learn that this could be dangerous to others. All right, but notice this kind of talk is very policy makers and philosophers would probably want to argue. We don't evaluate whether the learning process, all right, should carry with it a death sentence or not. Because what is the thing missing in the middle is the impact of the action on the greater society. And if you notice, these concepts are developed insulated from all these policy making talks. Okay? All the people, the behaviorists, all these people, they were only interested in looking at how do humans learn. And later on, right, they ask, how do animals and insects learn? They don't care about, after learning, right, if you are a criminal, how should I judge you? How should I deal with you? Because this is a talk in another field. Okay? So if we only want to talk about it like in general paper, speculating about it, then unfortunately we will have to conclude that there is not sufficient justification. Because why? Evidence is missing. We have evidence about what you learn, all right? Whether what you learn is efficient or not efficiently integrated into you. But the thing is, there is no evidence saying that just because you learn fast, therefore you learn all the bad things. Or just because you learn faster, you learn all the good things. Therefore, all the slow learners should be punished because sooner or later they will become criminals. There is no such evidence. All right? So for our subject, we probably can't push and qualify a statement like whether it's justifiable or not justifiable. All right? We can only say that, well, some people do make use of these things to learn what could be harmful to others. In that case, the further argument will have to be provided by another field of study. All right, maybe criminology, okay, or law and order, some kind of this kind of things. Question from the rest of you?
I
Yeah.
have one more question again. I'm trying to understand this conditioning properly. So let's say in the case of a human person and they go through abuse and they do the behavior or they are conditioned that if they behave certain ways, they're going to get abused in a certain way. So they're under the
They do something, then they will be abused in that way. Okay, I got it.
Like they get hit by their husbands or father or whatever. So how would you break that conditioning then?
That depends on what you're trying to break. So it's probably in this. Let's say the wife did not fawn on the husband, they never kissed the husband's feet when he arrived home. So then she will be whipped.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say this is a ridiculous scenario. Now, she might be, develop fear for the husband. So every time it comes evening hours, she cannot escape because the door is locked and she doesn't have a key. So she is very, very afraid she'll break down. And one day she was discovered because she was saved from the husband. Now, but you find that life for her may be different now. All right, she may have generalized it. So now any man that she has in mind, or she walks along the street and see a man, she will avoid the person deliberately, or hide somewhere, maybe even hide in the drain just to avoid a passerby who is male. So in that case, your talk about breaking it would be to decondition her to male human beings. Like passerby, it's nothing. She has to learn to recognize that there is more than just seeing a male person. There has to be something more than seeing and verbal interaction to be considered a threat. So in this case, we can always put her through this, where only if there is a very painful thing, like maybe when training, right? So we only show it to her once, the electric shock, ouch, okay? So something like that, yes. But we put the strap on, and then you show her a picture of a man, but you never you never shock her. So she starts to realize that seeing a picture is not dangerous. Of course, it doesn't really work this way, but for the sake of communication. So after that, she got used to it. Now you are actually breaking that. See? All right? You probably have to do more. Like, it's not going to be so easy, right? You look at the picture, okay, wait, oh, no electricity, okay, now I learned that seeing men is okay. You're going to do more, but you get the picture? So we start to break that. So if you are talking about breaking in this kind of thing, like we break the generalization, we make it specific now. It has to be seeing, and the person maybe rush towards you, plus the person might do a threatening pose, maybe want to hit you, plus there is pain, then you react. So they learn to identify moving from generalization to specific, or what we call discrimination learning. What is discrimination? It is not your prejudice, biasness kind of discrimination. It is a technical word telling you that you become more specific in identifying the consequence of a stimulus. So you discriminate, like initially it's all men are dangerous. That's overgeneralizing. Then you start to discriminate. Only men who will loom ahead in front of me and try to pretend to strike me are dangerous. So you now have discriminating ability. You separate those who are safe from those who might be dangerous. Okay, so that would be the breaking down of the process, yes. All right, let's move on. We've lingered long here. So you notice the next slide tells you about discrimination. I've discussed what it is, or rather I've described what it is. Didn't really put you all through a discussion. Now that you better understand what's the difference between generalization and discrimination, that's good enough, just read it. I do not need you to be able to devise methods, all right, to have the client learn how to generalize, how to discriminate. The syllabus here only requires that you know what is discrimination versus generalization, and that is good enough. So reading these slides would be enough. And then further to this will be what? How do we get people to learn different things like complex behaviors? For example, how did you get to class? For those people who are on campus, how did you get to class? Anyone? You walk, but walk from where? You probably didn't walk from home, right? But if you think about it, you walk from MRT station, meaning you have to take the MRT beforehand. So taking the MRT is, okay, let's consider this simply. Taking the MRT is one set of behavior. Walking from the station to here, City Hall station, let's say, to here is another set of behavior. And you have actually several sets. So if you started at home, maybe you need to walk to the bus stop, one set of behavior. Take the feeder bus, another set of behavior. Take the MRT, which is what we've discussed already, right? So total maybe 4 sets of behavior. In other words, right, throughout life, we are always using complex sets of behaviors in order to achieve one objective, right? So then the question comes, if conditioning is really the thing, how does it explain all this very complex behavior? You know, you can't be like just giving the dog food, and oh, the dog can do everything. No, the dog only can relate to the technician, the lab technician, and the food. So Skinner tried to answer this, and he discovered that there is something called chaining. Chaining means different sets of behavior are being pieced together through an overarching reinforcer, or maybe through several reinforcers. The different sets of behavior are pieced together in a logical flow. That is the concept of chaining. Then he found that by artificially modifying this thing, we can even make people learn certain things faster. So that is called shaping. Okay, let me repeat that. Chaining is to use one overarching or several reinforcement procedures. Chaining is the use of one overarching or several reinforcement procedures to have people learn several sets of simpler behavior. Putting them together to complete a complex action and achieve their objective. So we're talking about what chaining is: using one overarching or several simpler reinforcers or reinforcement procedures to have people learn several sets of behavior so that they can link up everyone and display a complex behavior to achieve their objectives. Okay, I can't repeat word for word, but I think the concept is there. All right? Now let's take a look at a video showing all this. What is chaining and what is shaping? We begin with shaping because it's easier to demonstrate via video what is shaping. If you want, you can read, all right, the more technical way of, although technical way means it's also shorter, of a definition of shaping and chaining, all right?
And we're going to try out a pigeon now, and I would...
So in this video, you see Skinner trying to make the pigeon turn 360 degrees. So obviously you can't tell the pigeon, hey, please turn 360. The pigeon will look at you crazy. What kind of primitive creature is this, right? So there's no way you can talk to the pigeon like that. But what he's doing is he will now look at when the pigeon is exhibiting a little bit of a full turn, but in the correct direction. He would give the pigeon food to reinforce that little bit of correct behavior. Then, once he thought that the pigeon has mastered this little bit, he would be a bit more demanding. So now the pigeon must turn more before it gets food. And in this way, right, the pigeon will eventually make a full turn, and after that, all the little bits are removed. Only a full turn will be given reinforcement. Take a look.
Try to pick out some particular pattern of behavior and make it a more frequent part of the repertoire of the bird. Next line. This bird has been already conditioned to eat from the magnet.
Okay, so like he said, right, this bird has already learned about where the food is coming from. So let's look at learning how to turn.
Certain sounds and the light flashes. Now we'll just watch its behavior a bit. It's not doing anything in particular, you see. Well, I'm going to try to get it to do something. Suppose I shape up the behavior of making a complete turn.
So the bird just turned about 100 degrees. It's given food now.
Behavior, there's more of it.
See, just now was about 100 degrees. Now it's like 150 degrees. So now he understood I must turn.
I'm waiting for it to turn counterclockwise now.
See, it doesn't really want to turn clockwise. Instead, it will turn counterclockwise.
Now wait for a more pronounced movement.
At this point, you notice it was trying to turn counterclockwise, but it didn't turn enough. So no food was given to it. Because Skinner has this idea of what once you've mastered the simpler stuff, we go on to a bit more. All right? And eventually the bird understood. It is not just a bit, it's all the way we turn. Done. See? Now, initially when scientists tried to do all this conditioning, it took them, like, for example, right, let's say it took them 2 hours to have an animal learn a particular behavior. Then when they applied principles of shaping, give approximate reinforcement, you find that the learning was accelerated. Anything that is like takes about 2 hours to learn, it could now be accomplished in 20 minutes. So meaning if we teach humans, we should always give them reward when they are a bit of the way successful. You don't wait until the human has become completely successful, then you give the reward. Of course, then you say, but then how do I give the reward? Give piecemeal reward, meaning your reward is broken down. So suppose you want the child to score an exam, all right? And to score means you have to do some, let's say, assessment practice. So if the child does the assessment, maybe say 3 pages of assessment every day on his own, give the reinforcement. Then right after the child is very accustomed to it, you will, of course for humans we have an extra thing, we can tell the child, no, 3 pages not enough, you do 4. We can negotiate. But even if you don't negotiate, it can work because the child will do 3 and where's my M&Ms? All right, so you wait, then maybe the child will, one of the trial and error things is the child will do a bit more. Maybe he will do half a page of assessment more. Okay, you give the M&Ms. All right? So over time, the child will do more and more. So now your aim is to have the child do 6 pages of assessment every day. So every time the child does a bit more, you give. Until mastered already, okay, don't give. Right? So eventually you find that the child can sit through doing 6 pages of assessment in 2 hours every day. They have learned to endure the boredom of studying. And now they will do so, and at the same time, they are on their way to, because they put in more effort. So we increase the chances of them scoring higher. You can't guarantee their score anyway. What you can do is increase the chances that they will score higher. But if they work more, they are likelier to score higher, correct? So that's the idea. It's all probabilistic, and you are trying to reinforce the increase of this probability. Okay? Now, what is chaining? So once you have shaped one set of behavior, these are like doing it to the various sets. Each shaping is only like to one set. When there are sets of behavior, what we do is we make it come together. Look at this pigeon. It's turning, right? Because there's the word turn.
Pigeons read. This one gives every indication, because he's been taught to distinguish between 2 words to behave appropriately. He's learned his different response to each sign by being rewarded with food. So the bird isn't acting independently. Its behavior is shaped by controlling its environment. The first task was to isolate an individual piece of behavior and see how that could be changed. Skinner did this by keeping individual pigeons at about 3/4 of their normal weight, so that the birds were always hungry.
Okay, so this part, right, it says it has nothing, this is a preparatory step rather than the actual training and shaping. So I thought I should clarify. You don't always have to keep if you are going to shape your children, you don't always have to keep them in a state of hunger, okay? Then later you might be sued. Or maybe when you grow old, they starve you to death. For the pigeons, they did it this way because they needed the pigeons to be always slightly hungry. So they will like go for food the moment they are released. So that will make the learning faster. Okay? So please don't do this on another human, all right?
And food can be used as an automatic reward. The pigeon was studied in a uniform box, one it quickly grew used to. One piece of behaviour, pecking a coloured disc, was measured on a graph. The pigeon learned that pecking the disc produced a reward. Then the behaviour of pecking could be studied in relation to how often that reward was offered. Or in Skinner's terms, what was the schedule of reinforcement?
Main thing is what we call schedules of reinforcement. Reinforcement, what Latham calls reward, and you can schedule it so that a reward occurs every now and then when a pigeon does something. We usually use a response to the pigeon pecking a little disc, spot in the wall, and reinforce with food. But
this is the earlier stage. They are getting the pigeon to actually respond to pecking. Later on, right, they will show the pigeon various words, but only when it pecked at the word peck. So the pigeon wouldn't know language, but the pigeon can tell shapes. Like the word is written in a certain way. So now it has recognized that one word only, peck. When you see the shape of peck, that shape in writing, you peck and you get food. All right? So that's why, again, they still believe that at that time, right, before the 1940s, 50s, they believe that animals don't think. Like the pigeon, while it's responding, it looks like, hey, how come the pigeon can know words? Has it learned how to read and write? No. It's only it's only differentiating the way the symbols were shaped. All right, so it could fool anyone thinking that, oh, the animals have learned to think. But the scientists will insist, no, they don't think. They can tell the difference in shape, but this is like every organism with eye probably can differentiate some shapes, right? So that's what it's doing. This is the initial part, pecking when you see something on the wall. Then later on, they stop. Something on the wall doesn't mean that it will give food. You have to look only at a particular shape, right?
you don't reinforce every time. You're going to be perhaps every 10th time, or perhaps only once every minute or something like that. There are very large number of schedules, and they have their special effects. And there is a good example of how you can move from the pigeon to the human case, because one of the schedules is very effective with rats or pigeons, is what we call the variable ratio schedule, and that is at the heart of all gambling devices and has the same effect. Pigeon can become a pathological gambler just as a person can. Now, the fact that we found that out could pigeon...
All right, the sound quality is not really that great. In other words, right, Skinner was trying to explain that even your gambling behavior, why are some people like so obsessed with the jackpot machine? Because the jackpot, right, in those days, of course, they pull. Nowadays, we have buttons, electronic. But whether you push the button to have the spin or you pull at the lever to have the spin, it is the same as the pecking behavior. After you've made the spin, so after you pull the lever a few times or you press the button a few times, there will be a reward. This reward is a bit of money. And notice they don't give you the jackpot all the time. They give you a few pieces of coin all the time. These poor pigeons, they are not given the chance to eat fully during the experiment. They are kept hungry, and then right during the experiment, they are only given a bit. That's why just now I mentioned something called piecemeal reinforcement. P-I-E-C-E-M-E-A-L, no space in between. It means you give little bit of reinforcement. The very same, okay, any employers here? Then later you throw a chair at me. The very same thing your employers pay you. Okay? You have to slog and do a lot. Then you are given a little bit of salary. Right? And you have to do so much more just to get a tiny bit of increment. And then after that, your friends still come and say, wow, pay raise, hey, give a treat. Then you say, shit, all gone. Right? But it works. Piecemeal reinforcement, it works much better than giving people a huge reinforcement. All right, a lot of people fail to see this, they think, wow, must make the person feel good. No, you should make the person feel starved. You give a little bit like it's good, but it's actually still not enough. Then after 20, 30 years of working, what do you see? You find that people cannot retire. They are so used to the behavior. Once they retire, you ask them to stop, they have to look for another job. Or else they tell you, cannot, I stay at home, I fall sick. Yeah, I got sick. There's so much things to do. But because they are not repeating their behavior, they feel uneasy, they fall sick. The power of reinforcement. Once you have got it into you, you are brainwashed. Okay, your boss will come and kill me anyway. All right? Question? That's how we get used to working. All right? We were given piecemeal reinforcement. So now you notice how that pigeon actually worked. So, and this part, right, shows you how it actually started to turn, to see the word turn, and it turns, pack, because initially it was taught to first respond this way. So all the various shaped behavior will now be put together as a big chain. All right? Question?
So all this, is it through this method of curiosity, like should we watch shows, like in China, what they use pigeon to send message, or they can recognize,
No.
all this all
It's true, but then there are a lot of errors. There are a lot of errors. The thing is, it is true that some birds can actually be sent as message carriers, but and only some birds, because they are more susceptible to, like if you put a hawk to the training, you will have to condition it for so long. By the time it's ready to do all the sending of letters for you, right, you retire from work already. Okay, hawks are more resistant, but pigeons are actually more susceptible to reinforcement. That's one of the reasons why they are used, in addition to the fact that they breed much faster. So you can have generations of observations quicker. The other thing is, you've got to find birds that have good homing instinct. That depends on their biology. Some birds, they actually, now for us, we probably will never know, but their brain structures are different. So birds that are more fine-tuned to the electromagnetic influence around, so for example, right, if a bird, those migrating birds, to them, they can actually see the North Pole like it's bluish in color. Okay, at least that's what we think, like it looks bluish, because that's if that part of the brain is how we put it into humans, it should be bluish in color. So the way they look at the scene is slightly different from us. So if they have to go in a certain direction, they will look at the color and decide. But because the electromagnetic wave will create a certain disturbance where certain direction will appear more bluish, it gives them this so-called compass effect. So you also have to get birds that are like that, and it doesn't work all the time because the different seasons, the gravitational pull might be altered a little bit. So in the past, they do use birds as messengers, but it's very limited birds. Pigeons are one of those that can be used, but it doesn't mean you always get it there. Maybe you send out 10 messages, maybe only 6 or 7 will actually reach the location. All right, provided it's not too far. So all these things are fantasized in novels. And in Harry Potter, right, they even send owls to do your thing. No, owls will never send your message. All right, they'll probably play and tear it. Okay, but of course they will have what's that old professor's name? That woman that changes to McGonagall? Yeah, but she will be the defense, right, saying no, birds are smart. All right. What happens? Oh wait, I should go back to here first. So I gotta switch out this thing, right?
Yeah.
Let me close it. Okay. All right. So now you watch shaping and chaining. A child can also be trained this way. If you want the child to prepare a tea for you, you first shape the child's behavior to operate maybe say the oven, all right, to boil the water, or maybe the microwave oven, all right, to heat up water, and then to make use of the different thing. So once the child has learned the various components, we will start with the first two. So if the child shows the first two, like go to the cabinet, take out the can of tea leaves, scoop a bit and put into the cup. So the child first learn where that thing is. How is reinforced. Then the child learns about another thing separately, like how to scoop up. But now you want the child to show both together, go, retrieve the can, scoop out the correct amount, then you give reinforcement. So that is chaining. All right, so you chain and chain and chain, eventually the child will be what? Will be making you pots of tea all the time. All right, so that's how it's done. And you remember just now, Skinner said something called schedule. We can schedule the reinforcement in order to make the behavior more efficient, more efficiently learned. This was what he talked about. This thing. Like, what is this graph for? Okay, to understand this graph, okay, I know I skipped through several things, right? But you have already learned this. You know that reinforcement increases the frequency of behavior and punishment reduces the frequency of behavior. At least somebody said you learned that before, right? We covered that last week. So let's move to, hang on, I'll come back to this shortly. Let's continue from what Skinner said first. How can we give reinforcement? Okay, just flip down a few pages, you see it. How can we give reinforcement? Should we give it the moment the child does things correctly, or we give it later? But you learned, no need, I'm going to move back. But you learned just now that you learned just now that there is something called contiguity, correct? Now that works very well for things that you learn in a reflexive, physiological kind of manner. What about all those environmental, artificial things? Like maybe if you come to class early, you get $50 cash because the school rewards you for coming, something like that. These things, there is really no contiguity in this case, wouldn't have that much an impact. You stretch it out, but the hunger pangs will be felt. But the money, you stretch it out, right? Whether you get the $50 like at the start of class or end of class, is still the $50. Okay? So we now have to think of how to deliver all the reinforcers. According to the research, Skinner showed that there are 4 ways. First, there are 5, but the so-called continuous way is actually unrealistic. Continuous reinforcement simply means that every time you do something that is targeted, the desired behavior, you immediately get a reinforcement. So for example, if you turn off lights because you want to save the world, you turn off, once you finish using the room, you turn off the lights. So every time you turn off the lights, off the switch, there is a hole at the switch there. Maybe if you like chocolate, right? So maybe one M&M will drop from it. Where do you get such devices? Do you think people sell chocolate dropping switches? Don't have, right? Got automatic switch, but don't have chocolate dropping switch. So these are unrealistic stuff. You cannot be giving people reinforcement every time they do correct things. But if you do that, theoretically, it's called continuous reinforcement. In real life, practically speaking, in other words, there are only 4 ways. First, you've got to understand this word called fixed or variable. All right? Now, fixed means after you've done a certain number of times, so it's a fixed number, you get the reinforcer. It could be in the form of time, it could be in the form of doing something. I'll give you an example. Suppose, right, if you sit through 1.5 hours of the lecture, and you know that every time at 8:30 you will go for the break. All right? So this is a fixed thing. Endure from 7:10 until 8:30. Yes! Right? 1 hour 20 minutes for sure. But if it's by frequency, it could be what? So you know that you have to write. Okay? Every time you write until the 100th line of notes, break time. That's what we call ratio. So, sorry, let's go back to fixed. So fixed means there is a certain expected number or duration, then the reinforcement will occur. As for duration and number, it comes in these terms. Look here. Ratio and interval. So if you have to sit through 1 hour 20 minutes, that is counting in terms of time, right? Then those type of planning is interval planning. Interval schedule of reinforcement. But if you have to write like 100 lines of notes, every time you hit the 100th line, you are doing by counting number of actions, correct? So always it is actions, number of actions, or what we more technically call frequency of occurrence, of behavioral occurrence, that's ratio. So you can either fix the 100th line, so every time you write to the 100th line, okay, go for break. That will be a fixed ratio. Or if it's unfixed, right? So for example, maybe this time around you write the 50th line of notes, you go. Next time you have to write until 70 times, you go. And another time, maybe you just write about 65 times, you go. And people will say, how come, like this random thing, how to judge? Very simple. One way out is to get 10 measurements. Like you go for 10 breaks later, right? You realize that, first time I went after 60th line of notes. Second time I went 70 lines of notes, I went. Then after that, 65. So you sum up all this number, you divide by 10, you get an average count of roughly when the variable reinforcement will occur. Get it? If it's fixed, it's very standard. Every let's say 70th line you write, you know you will go for the break. So timing is the same. If you get your salary at the end of the month, you will always get it after about 30 days of waiting period. But not every job is like that. Some jobs pay you on the spot, like some freelance jobs. So these people will get variable because it's not fixed. They will get variable ratio. Or sometimes it's variable interval, meaning they get their pay sometimes after 1 week, sometimes after 3 weeks. In the middle, they still have to do the task. You don't do the task, you won't get the pay. All right, so the pre-existing condition is you must be doing the task, but upon reaching, right, you do the correct task, then once the task accumulates and you reach that fixed ratio or that fixed interval, or maybe it's variable, but you hit that target, then the reinforcement will come. So pay attention. There are two things involved here. Most people's focus are on the schedule. The schedule itself won't give you the reinforcement. Then what is the other point? The action. You got to be displaying the correct action while this schedule is used to monitor you. So during this time before you hit the reinforcement, you are constantly displaying correct behavior. Then once you have correct behavior plus you hit the timing of the schedule, you get the reinforcement. So no correct behavior, even if you hit the timing, no reinforcement. Got it? So most people always think, okay, so we'll just follow this. No. In real life, you have to be showing. So it's like, okay, let's look at this way. Salary. In Singapore, right, when you receive your income, your pay, what kind of schedule is it following? Is it fixed or is it variable? Fixed, because you get it at the end of 1 month. So every end of the month you get your pay. This is actually called what? A fixed what? Fixed ratio or fixed interval? Fixed interval. But if during this 1 whole month, right, you play punk, you didn't turn up for work, you go on leave without taking MC, so you don't do all the necessary tasks, will you get paid? Yeah, you won't get paid. So we have to have the correct display of behavior, plus you hit the requirement of the schedule, then you will be reinforced. No good show of behavior, you still won't get it. So if your person shows the required behavior plus they hit the schedule, they will now be able to learn more efficiently. So after that, they get what? They become habituated to the action. That's why just now I said, right, after 30 years of working, people don't know how to retire anymore. Because they have been showing the correct behavior for so long, and then it's burned in further through a fixed interval schedule, they are stuck. Right? But they will rationalize. Nobody will explain to you, oh, I like to work because I was, put over this last 40 years in a schedule of reinforcement, and then I was blah, blah, blah. Nobody explained that to you. Instead, right, the brain won't understand this. What the mind will try to tell you is that the person will tell you, I feel uneasy because I think I'm a workaholic. That's why I must work after retirement. Or they'll tell you, no lah, cannot stop working. Then later I don't have income and I fall sick, how? They will give you all sorts of excuses and rationalization. They won't be able to tell you this thing because this operates at the unconscious level. Of course, it might not be for you since you are smart, you decided to take lesson and understand that you could be brainwashed by the government and your bosses. Okay? Yes.
I want to share this, just a comment on the class about this reinforcement. I think the student point of view, reinforcement is necessary in operating behavior.
Yeah.
So I think recently a bit challenging. I know usually on a low rank and file, usually the employer will give this no MC incentive. Now the government say you cannot do this or discourage this.
Yeah.
So this no MC incentive, I think it's a good.
Not necessary. The no MC incentive is to ensure that the work, because you want to keep the person coming for work. You give them more reward if they don't. But the problem is, this is not a behavioral problem. This is a problem of the person may be sick, but because of the money, they still want to come, right? But they will then carry the disease to the office and make sure everybody get infected. So under policy making, it is a bad thing. So the government said this is illegal. But in the behavioral point of view, they will say, then this is good. You notice that the work itself will never break. You work until you die, you'll still be working. On the other hand, right, a further implication is, who is really benefiting? The boss. Because you're always given a fixed pay. You work, you are sick, you work until you die, also you get the fixed pay. But the company will profit. And profits is always bigger than salary. Right? Of course, there is more risk from the boss, but that's the nature of business. You are supposed to accept more risk, like maybe your business will go bust. Like there's a war, or suddenly all the costs go up. But keeping things constant, while you bear the higher risk, you also get a higher profit, especially if you plan ahead. So this kind of policy is bad because it makes people really become slaves to work. And they then, after that, like playing jackpot. So you know the moment you run out of money, you go away, right? Somebody sits in, he's going to win your money. So people don't want to go away from the jackpot machine. They keep there, but in the end, right, the machine is rigged in such a way where you will lose all your money if you just sit there. So the bosses are smart. They then decided to make use of jackpot machine principle and give you something called no MC incentive. And then because they are not as smart as you, right, come and take lessons. So they basically are playing jackpot while working for the boss. Of course, this kind of thought, well, like I'm instigating rebellion. But I'm not. What I'm doing is I'm explaining what are some of the principles that are really in use, but has never been explained to people. It is our own responsibility to make sure that once we know, we resist certain unfair treatment, but we don't play punk until like we want to clobber the person who's trying to cheat us. You can negotiate for better pay, or if there's not enough manpower, you insist that I come and work, right? Then you got to respect that sacrifice of time and increase the payment. Not condition my behavior so that I eventually just work for you. So if in good days, bad days, I work until I almost die, but the profit for the boss will increase. So there's a need to negotiate. But you notice these are very complex things now. The government is not going to teach you to negotiate. But they will tell you, I will give you WSF incentive. Please go and learn how to negotiate. Right? Because if they tell you all these things, a lot of people will start to rebel and not work. But that's not the idea. The idea is that you learn how to protect yourself, not create trouble for yourself. Because when people rebel and stop working, the entire economic infrastructure will collapse. So then everyone will suffer. See? So there are a lot of things involved that sometimes people cannot explicitly tell you. But when you sit down and analyze, you find that there is a middle way to doing things without becoming what we call exploited. Okay? Question? Now, there is also a way to resist, but it's very tough. That's why jackpot machine is very bad. Jackpot machines literally, now, before I go on to talk about jackpot, last 2 bits of information, we should go for the break. Which schedule of reinforcement will make you work like a bull, non-stop, just keep working and working and working? The answer is clearer if you look at this slide. All right? Which one is steepest? Meaning, right, the steepest curve is the one that is in the shortest period of time, you will work the most. Variable ratio, isn't it? So when you have to do something and you never know when the reward will come, like pulling the lever in a jackpot machine, you don't know when you will hit the jackpot, you just keep pulling. And you know that the more you pull, because timing is beyond our control sometimes, but number of times we pull, because it's now ratio. Or what you will do is you quickly pull very fast. So you are doing a lot of work. But of course, the machine is rigged in such a way where the more you pull, the more money you have to dump into the machine. So that's why casinos will make money. They love to set up jackpot machines. They don't really like to put up table games that much. Because jackpot machines, right, will give them the unfair advantage. And people fall under the spell of VR without knowing why. They just pull and pull and pull and pull. Okay? And then getting salary is the worst. You look at fixed interval. In fact, fixed interval is such that you further can be lazy. You notice this thing, like there's a flattened area, then it goes up. Every time we finish a break, we will have difficulty starting. Then it goes up, like, oh, nearer the end of the week, Sunday coming, yes, work harder, quick, finish the work, okay, go Monday blues again. Right? And some people say, oh, that's because you have Monday blues, so you have lacking motivation. It's actually not. Actually, the thing is, whether after they have done the research, they realize it's because, right, once you get the reinforcer, the expectation of the next reinforcer is so far away, that expectation that it's far away itself is decelerating your willingness to get to work. So you literally have to work a bit more, and you see that it's closer now, you will pick it up. It's not because of having Monday blues, because I'm still enjoying myself. My mind is still on vacation. These are unconscious processes where your mind will rationalize and telling you, oh, that holiday felt so good, better slow down and work. All these talk are just useless talk. It's because this thing has an impact on the way your nervous system is wired. So when it's far away, the next yummy thing is far away, there is no push. All right? But what is good is that if people adopt this, that's why your bosses want to give you fixed interval, is that you have an expectation of when the reward is coming. So there's less likelihood that you will rebel. Whereas over here, right, in variable ratio, you will work very, very fast, but you will also suffer from exhaustion. Plus, if you don't get your reward, sometimes, right, you notice the jackpot machine, after 1 million pulls also, no big jackpot will come. So in such circumstances where the reward is cannot be expected, some people would become frustrated and they will stage a rebellion. So in order that companies, countries, organizations don't collapse, they try not to give variable ratio. There is only one industry that will give you variable ratio: sales industry. But this is beyond the discussion here. But the money itself has further suppressing effect on rebellion. Okay, that's why it's possible to do it. Otherwise, right, if you are a clerk, you are maybe a medical person, all right, you have to go by fixed way of being paid. Got it? All right, let's go for the break. Yeah, I think. Never mind, you all can go for the break. I'm just checking, see if I missed out anything. I thought I have one slide. Oh yeah, I'll come back and talk about this later. Okay, so what do you need me to do? Stop sharing?
I already stopped sharing.
Okay. Okay, I see you all at 9 o'clock. Okay? Reinforcement is any kind of thing that could be rewarding, it increases the frequency of behavior, and punisher is now something that will reduce the chances of you acting on it. Okay, so this part is easy, but what if you try to shape behavior by removing the reinforcer? For example, right, let's say in order to encourage people coming to class, the school gives you $50 every time you come on time. It's been ongoing like this for half the session, half the lesson. So maybe for 5 lessons, you've taken back a total of $250. So that's like not too bad, pretty good, right? And then suddenly they decided to change. So for 6 lessons onwards, right, they make a sudden announcement and tell you that, sorry, this has been discontinued. Now, how would you feel? How many of you would feel that, wow, lucky, at least I got 250, yes? How many would feel this way? Otherwise, how would you feel? When people just suddenly discontinue your reinforcement? Feel cheated, huh? So you might say, stupid thing, no money, don't give lah, give in the first place for what? So we start to curse and say, right? This kind of reactionary behavior is to the withdrawal of reinforcement. It's called extinction burst. It will happen every time we try to modify another person's behavior through the use of stopping or reducing the reinforcement. Reducing the reaction is still not so strong. Stopping, you'll find that it's very strong. Okay? That's why the question here is learning always a smooth process. A prior point to this is that, do you think you can always be reinforced? No. You've already learned that. See, if I flip back just now to what we covered earlier on. Oh, sorry, too fast. You notice that I mentioned continuous reinforcement is impractical. It's unrealistic. Because there's nothing in this world that will constantly give you a reinforcement every time you do something correct. In all settings, right, even if it is not from your boss, even if it's not from another human person, you are unlikely to be reinforced every time you do correct things. So that's already saying that, you may not get your reinforcement. Then, so that tells you that learning is not always smooth. In addition to this is that sometimes reinforcement can be removed, all right, when it's like supposed to be given to you. How do we deal with extinction burst then? Okay. Now, the most straightforward thing to envision this is actually you look at the birds just now. Remember, Skinner was making the bird turn. So when the bird turned, maybe say 100 degrees, counterclockwise, he gave the bird food. But later on, the bird tried 100 degrees, no more food. So there is withdrawal. And the bird may have to the bird then suddenly struggle a bit, then turn more to the clockwise side before it tried again to come to 150 degrees counterclockwise. So, but that was a very simple experiment, very simple behavior. So the extinction burst is not so visible, not strong enough. In real life, it's usually worse. Let's take a look. What could happen? Now, you may be teaching a child to read, or worst case, the child is not listening to much instruction because the child requires special education, or also has certain needs won't follow instructions all the time. So then what happens? It closes entirely. Okay, never mind. I want to let them watch video.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh. Because when you touch it,
Oh, yeah,
it
it's okay.
yeah,
I'm so sorry.
it's okay. Let's turn this off. Yeah. So for example, here we have a child being taught to read, but then he doesn't want to read. Okay, he doesn't want to read. So what might he do?
It's always important to assess the function of a behavior so that we can develop an intervention plan that makes sense.
Okay, I only need you to listen to this part because planning is very important. It will help you deal with any oncoming extinction burst. So for the details, you can refer to this video and upload it. I haven't changed it because some people said they couldn't get it, so I left it be. But if you have not downloaded, please go and download the videos. I will change it by this Wednesday. So I'll upload the next set, all right? So let's go to the part, okay, here is the example. There will be a demonstration of a negative example dealing with extinction burst, followed by a positive one, all right?
Right now, we're going to practice tracing our name, and then you're going to write your name on the lines. Here you go. Now, Duncan, we don't throw our paper. We need to try again.
All right, so for example, the child was playing halfway. It was fun, so those were reinforcement. Now he was made to sit, ready for lesson. All right, the freedom, the fun to play, removed. So the way he expressed extinction burst will be as you've seen it, as you've just watched it, right? Refusal to work, and then being rebellious about it.
Now, trace your name.
So you see, if you have not planned ahead of time, you will be subjected to this kind of tantrum, all right? And you'll be asking yourself, so what should I do to stop this? The same thing with some parents when they deal with their children, they haven't trained the children enough beforehand, so they don't know how to discipline. And remember, in the past, right, we had caning, all right? Parents will do caning. They will inflict physical pain. But now, modern days, we shun away from this practice. But in place of it, what is there? So if you don't cane your children, what do? Nothing, right? Most parents do nothing nowadays. So they just complain why children nowadays are very difficult to discipline. But the Western people from Western culture, they have something called timeout. Not that they know how to do it. A lot of them also don't know how to do it properly, but they have something to replace. All right? So let's take a look. What if you plan nicely? Well, let's finish up with the negative example.
Now we can't do it anymore. Here, you can look at a book. This was an example of a successful escape response from the student. He ripped the paper and was able to escape the task that was presented. Further, he was able to perform an easier task. Over time, the child may learn that this response of throwing or ripping is successful.
In other words, where do you think throwing tantrum comes from? Thanks to parents, tantrum will be formed. In this case, right, not only is reading the book an easier task than writing, but if the child likes picture books, because they like seeing pictures, it becomes a fun thing. So now the child is reinforced to throw even stronger tantrums. All right? So parents lament, oh, why my child so difficult? They need to rewind and look at how they actually make it come. By not tolerating, all right, in an appropriate way, the extinction burst, and we react to it in an unacceptable way, although parents may not have evaluated it's unacceptable because they lack the knowledge. So then, it's like this guy, right? Now, if you think about it, haven't you seen a lot of parents out there, when the child throws a tantrum, they simply just give the child an iPad? So now then sometime later they complain, why is my child always on computer games several years down? Right? And then they expect the iPad to actually get the child to be okay. All it does is it presents something fun. So then the child learns to what? To be aggressive at handling devices. So, is it a very surprising thing where tantrums came from? Now let's look at, once you are prepared, what happens? All right, demonstration 2.
Remember, if you need a break, you can say, I need a break, please. Okay.
Meaning, even before starting the task, he already spoke to the child and maybe even conditioned the child. Like for example, so if the child has special needs, cannot follow through, then a simpler thing has to be done. All right. So they haven't started any form of writing. They are already doing, repeat after me, can I have a break please? And the child, if the child maybe was distracted, because children with special needs, they don't always follow through. So you wait, or you distract him with some toys, and ask him, then you suddenly become serious and say, repeat after me. So if they repeat after you, so suppose this child has only moderate difficulty level, then the child will be able to repeat, maybe say one very simple sentence, like, I need a break, please. So the moment the child said like that, even when they first said it, they may not be looking at you. They may be looking elsewhere and saying it. We will still give the reinforcement until they are able to at least dart their eyes. So now they are using more socially acceptable skills to present themselves. When these are all done, then it's time to teach them how to write. Preparatory work. For timeout, it is about having greater stamina than your children. Actually, it is possible. Most parents don't give birth to children when they are 50, 60 years old, correct? So at 30 years old, you will run out of breath if you allow the child to run in front of you. But if you time out and you put the child back, so you repetitively put the child back in place, no hitting, no nothing, very soon the child will, because of the repetition, of course there will be extinction bursts, but the child will become worn down. So after some time, you find that they will stick to standing that location longer than maybe just a few seconds. It will build up to minutes. When you finally are able to have the child stand at a location without going anywhere, what will happen is you are now ready to bring the child to the shopping mall, and if they are throwing tantrum or whatever, straight away we go to the child, must be together, safety first, right? You bring the child to, let's say, a stairwell. So you stand at the place where they won't throw tantrum and then slip and then roll down the stairs. But they are just there, okay? And then time out. So you go to a place in a shopping mall where there is not so much human traffic and do the timeout. But the child will be more likely to cooperate a timeout because they are already used to a timeout at home. You don't suddenly time out the person. There has to be an institutionalized way of learning it. Okay? So preparation is the key to reducing all these extinction bursts.
You can have a break with the book. Nice asking for a break. Look at the book for a minute.
The timing is also established. You get to read the book for a minute. Will the child know? No. But it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
all right? It's just an indication.
All right, we're going to try to do our work now. Okay, let's trace our sheet. Can you trace it for me? That's very good tracing. You're doing such a great job.
But what is happening is the child first requested and got the timeout. So the child is now less likely to throw a tantrum because having been satisfied. So they can struggle through the activity, maybe not as long as you hope to be, it's fine. Do a bit, give reinforcement. And as the child becomes better and better, like the pigeon, right, you then extend the time. So then they can now do 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, okay? Oops, wrong button.
This is successful prompting of a functional communication response. Note the prompt of the appropriate response. Remember, if you need a break, you can say, I need a break, please. Okay, you can have a break with the book. Nice.
What is not shown here is this is actually done through shaping in the first place. Like I said, before any work was done, the child was just shaped to respond, I need this, I need that. And then now it's actually chained to a more complex task of having to do some active work. All right, question? Okay, you can watch this at home at your own time, but the idea is to impart across, there is such a thing called extinction burst. People will, people will react when their reinforcers are not coming on time, or maybe even removed. And to deal with this, we usually have to work ahead of time by planning, all right, how to manage this, give people outlets. Like if they request first, we can accommodate. But what if the child keep requesting? Then you will say no. So first time they request, okay. But second time the child says, I don't want to, I want to read. You say, no, you just read. Okay, we are going to do the work now. So you encourage the child, because the child has been satisfied, it is less likely, not impossible, but less likely that they will just have an outburst. So if you then tell the child, no, let's do the work this round first. You just read, so let's do the work. Likelier, the child will go through with it. But if you cave in, it's no good, because suppose the child requests, after reading, right, 1 minute, you take away, then the child say, then you give again. Now the child knows that I can demand. So we must avoid this kind of demand. All right, we go according to a certain order. 2 or 3 times later, you find that the child will cooperate very nicely. Okay? People who are not used to this, they will usually think, serious man? Really? It's easier said than done, correct, Mr. Lam? It's not true. You got to be used to this method of thinking and acting. Like you give and take, but you only do it once. And then we run through certain things. If really cannot, we already have taught the child time out. So we do nothing, we just sit there and stare at each other. Okay? Question? So that's how things are done. And then very soon you find that the child actually can discipline themselves. And this is not only limited to children. Without the need to use timeout, you find that some of these are actually applied onto animals. But it has been shown that animals have anything ranging from 1 to maybe say 6, 7 years old kind of IQ to a human, to an adult human. So that's why that circuses can train their animals. That's why certain special forces can train their animals to carry out tasks. Because to a certain extent, the level of brain evolution is about the same. And all these techniques can be targeted at a lower level. You don't need words for some of these. Question? Now let's move beyond. Is this important? I think it's good just to read it. This tells you whether operant conditioning is applicable. Of course it is. Throughout, we have already mentioned it's useful to train animals. It's also good to shape people's socialization behavior and their maybe work motivational behavior. All right? And then this emphasizes what I meant just now. According to Thorndike, he never believed that animals could think. There is no such thing as insight, there's no such thing as thinking. They are simply reinforced, so meaning animals are simply adapting to the rewards made available. So it's like, you are just doing this in a very mechanistic way. But he was wrong. Animals do have insight. We will see that later on. And furthermore, it has been later found that actually sometimes when animals and humans, right, they are observing on the side, they are already learning. Because the behaviorists suggested that we need to give people reward so that they will do something. But it has been found that latent learning means what? Latent is like sleeping. How can you learn when you sleep? It's not literally sleeping. It's just that you may be on the side observing what is happening. So you may not be the one receiving the actual reinforcement, but subsequently you find that the learning is much faster. I'll give you one example. Talk is very tough, right? You can read another example from what is listed here. So one example would be what? Something we call vicarious learning, meaning learning by observing others. In one cage, you have a cat, all right? A cat stares at a food just outside the cage, but cannot reach. Okay? So the food is placed in such a way where it's on a slider. The cat can reach the slider, but cannot reach the food. Now, another cat is put in a cage just behind this front cat. So in other words, I want you to imagine the scene where there are two cages. One cage in front, one cage at the back. And these cages are not opaque, so you can actually see through what's happening. Let's call the front cat F, front, and the cat at the back cage B, for back. So the back cat, right, B is looking at F. So F initially was just exploring and look at the food. Wow, I want the food, but cannot reach. But eventually it would have explored and then start to what? Pull at the slider where the plate of food is put on. So this thing comes closer. And when it gets close enough, the cat could actually lick. You know, it pushes its head just a bit at the cage bar and it licks the food. So successfully getting the food. But you look at your time. Wow, it took this cat like 20 minutes to finally figure out that there's a slider and pull it nearer. Now, after you replace and you got another new cat. So there's like F1 cat, F2 cat, F3, all the new cats are there. All the time, right, the back cat, B, is watching. And every time they pull the thing near, oh, they were able to get the food. Now, let's say after 5 trials. So F1, F2, F3, F4, F5. Then you put B in the front cage. Do you think B needs 20 minutes to go for the food? Yeah, no. It would have learned that, wow, they got the food, wow, they got the food. And then after that, right, it will take it maybe 7 minutes. All right, cats are not like humans. We have stronger ability for insight. So we might instantaneously get it. Some animals, they need a bit of time. Not that they can't, they also can achieve insight but slower. So maybe 7 minutes, which still beats the 20 minutes, right? So moral of the story is that the reinforcer was never given to the B cat. But the B cat was observing, wow, reinforce, wow, eating away, oh my God, I also want. So when it's its turn, it could actually do it much faster. Of course, you could say, hey, but then that is a way of modeling. Actually, that has both modeling and vicarious reinforcement. Vicarious reinforcement is when you get reinforced, but you are only observing the reinforcement. Okay? Now then, I talk about modeling, right? So there's this guy called Albert Bandura. In early 1970s to mid-70s, he published several papers, all right, decrying TV. So he said televisions are bad. For 2 reasons. One would be an observation that even back in the 70s, right, the average number of violent scenes in an average TV, the usual drama, right, in America's TV program, about 68% of TV programs would have some violent scene. So to him, that is a very high count. It's like 2/3 of the way all violent one. But some people may argue and say, a big deal is TV, or it's not real. So he had another experiment where he had children between 4 to 6 years old watch a video clip of violence in action. What's that violence? So they saw someone in the room snatching away all the toys, holding the toys, or a video clip of someone smacking a Bobo doll. Bobo doll is this huge doll that when you hit, it will swing down, then it will come back standing again. So basically, the children were in a room and they watched a video clip like that. But the key is they were never given any chocolate, biscuit, or whatever as reinforcer of what they watched. But the funny thing is, after that, right, even though the children and their mothers still didn't know that they are still in the experiment, they thought that it's break time. So these children were put inside a room with toys, with Bobo doll. And they started to act out like they watched in the video clip. They smack, they throw, they turn violent. Children who had never used guns started to pick up toy guns, shoot, and then throw toys and smack. And one little girl even mimicked the final scene of how to torture, all right, and tear apart some dolls. So it shocked Bandura in saying that you don't even need to reinforce children. No sweets, nothing was given. And yet they are just learning all the violence from TV. So you put two together, watching all these violent shows, Means that you don't even need to give them any good stuff, any reinforcement, they will still become what? Perhaps 68% as violent as what they watch. So after that, he became a strong advocate of TV is bad. And then his things became what we learn today, two things. One, we don't need to always rely on reinforcement. Humans are monkey see, monkey do creatures. We can model, we imitate. And if you, during the midst of your imitation, you are observing a reinforcement for some other organism, you will then further have something called vicarious reinforcement. I write it up and you can type it in. So this happens to be a format of how reinforcement can be delivered. It's not suitable all the time because sometimes you really have to give the real thing. Otherwise, vicarious reinforcement is recognized as just as powerful as actual reinforcement. Vicarious means you actually what? You just simply observe it happening. Okay? All right? So imitation is when you literally follow through whatever you see. Modeling is you follow through whatever you see in principle. So there can be a bit of difference in your final action. Got it? It's almost saying like imitation is a form of mimicry, totally copying. So now let's sum up. Learning can Learning can happen through certain processes, certain avenues. One will be, what kind of conditioning have you learned? Classical conditioning, where you learn things through some form of physiological changes. Maybe hunger, then you are given food, that's why you learn something. Now, when it's not physiological, you learn it through what? Because your external environment is manipulated. That would be called what kind of conditioning? Operant conditioning, which is also the kind of learning we use, all right, when we try to learn how to manipulate the environment. So once we manipulate the environment, we expect that we get a reward, that will be a reinforcement, or we avoid some kind of punishment maybe. So there is classical and operant conditioning. Then humans will also be able to learn through modeling and imitation. Okay, so modeling and imitation are considered as one class by itself. So it's not 4 methods, it's 3 methods of learning. Got it? All right. Then the question is, can you combine them? Of course, you can always have someone model, then you give them reinforcement. All right. So unlike Skinner, right, waiting for the bird to do a little bit like such as shaping, we literally instruct another human person to what? You just follow whatever he's doing. And then when they fully completes that, they are given the reward. For example, you are traveling to another country, maybe you go to Ukraine, but it's dangerous there and you're unfamiliar with the things. But you're hungry sooner or later, right? So you got to eat. So what you do is you look at how people eat and you follow through. And the reward will be what? Your stomach gets filled, you no longer suffer hunger pangs. So nobody taught you how to eat. You simply see what they are doing and you follow. All right, then you got the reinforcement. So now you have modeling and you have reinforcer at the end. Yeah.
Regarding the external reinforcement, is it the case? I mean, recently we have the media that people in Singapore, some of them
People what?
People, we read in the media recently that people just call up the Ukraine embassy to volunteer to fight. Is it because of the external reinforcement?
Could be.
And the government are quite concerned, hey, this is our fight, if you volunteer to go and fight. What what makes them suddenly, is it external reinforcement after?
No, there could be actually,
Maybe what is happening in Ukraine or something like that. I mean,
of course, they are disturbed by the situation over there. Now think about it. Suppose you are someone now. Now we got to put in a few more things because we are talking about a realistic, real life situation. So we can't just be limited to all these very pure stuff that you're learning. We are learning all the pure stuff, making it simple for ease of understanding. Now let's try to apply all of them together to understand a real life situation. If you are someone who is very kind, very empathetic, but you are courageous, can there be such people? During SARS, we already witnessed. Medical health or healthcare people, right, they go into the ward. SARS was actually much more deadly killer than COVID. But you find that they can quit their job or ask for a transfer to another department, but they didn't. Some doctors and nurses insisted on working in the emergency department. So we know that people can be kind and courageous at the same time. These are personality traits. They are not part of this. So a person can be courageous and kind at the same time. As for how they got this, let's ignore it for a moment. Don't talk about the source. So suppose you then act on your personality trait. And you read the news, you watch the video, the news of Ukraine being bombarded. And you see all the gross sight of how humans were mistreated or injured. Now, a person who is kind, wouldn't they feel pain? Especially if they are very strong in empathy. So in this case, right, there is actually a nauseous stimuli acting on the person. Now, you can choose to do two things. You can choose not to do anything, which is inaction. I have a question on the side first. If you are doing nothing, okay, can it be called a reinforcement process has taken place? Yes, no? Nope, the answer is no. When we are doing nothing, there is no behavior. So if you just sit in front of a couch doing nothing literally for the situation, you can't say that there is any, you can't say for sure there's any reinforcement going on. Now, so let's consider the alternative picture first. The person watched all the scenes, they are uncomfortable. In order to reduce this discomfort, the person said, I must do something. So one action could be, I go to the embassy, I volunteer, hey, send me to your country, I will fight for you. Or I can fight because I'm a Singaporean with all the Singaporean guys who are fit has gone through military training. So you just need to know, you don't need to train me from scratch. So he made that offer. Now, suppose this person is sent to fight. How would he feel? He requested and he got sent. How would he feel? General answer, please. Imagine yourself being a brave person and you got sent there. How would you feel? Huh? Feel good. So first off, what is the reinforcer here? The feelings of? Yeah, maybe a sense of achievement, all right? Sense of feeling good. So you first get reinforced by this good feeling. Next thing is, if you are now allowed to do something, how would you feel about the original discomfort of, oh my God, I'm seeing all these people die and I'm doing nothing? You know, the helplessness, the discomfort. What will happen to this original feeling? Go up or go down? Go down. So in other words, you are avoiding a negative outcome. When people take any action, that means they adopt an action or not through inaction. They are adopting some action to reduce a painful stimuli. This is called negative reinforcement. So there is a positive reinforcement where they are fed something nice, like the feeling of sense of achievement. At the same time, they are able to reduce the uncomfortable feeling inside them. So then there is negative reinforcement. So we have double reinforcing forces on the person already. Okay?
If donate money, positive.
If you, after donation, you feel good because you have done something, that is positive reinforcement. Whether it is negative reinforcement, we don't know, because we don't know whether a person, right, when they don't donate, whether they feel awful. Because when you are saying that you want to go and fight, probably you really feel very, very awful. That's why you want to take this very drastic step. But donating money, you must keep in mind, in Singapore context, right, a lot of us have donated money before. Sometimes we feel that donation is like just another process. We don't even really feel that uncomfortable with holding some donation. So it's gray area. It depends on the person's upbringing. It depends on a lot of prior experience. We cannot say for sure. But the very rare act of I want to volunteer to fight, this one, it doesn't happen often. So we know the person must have felt, at least we can make a good guess, which has high probability of being correct, that the person really was uncomfortable at seeing all this blood and poor citizens suffering. Okay? So we have already talked about specifically two kinds of reinforcement procedures, positive and negative reinforcement. What else? Now, the person may not have just gone through like that. Maybe he was watching the news and realized that there are actually some volunteers from other countries who are also willing to go and fight. Like some of those people who join the terrorists, right? The radicals, they also do that. They watch, and then they say, I also want to go and fight. Except the radicals fight for a different cause. But they weren't given any reinforcement in the first place. They were just watching and they mimic, they model. So the third thing could be this person, all right, although the person may initially thought of, I want to donate money. Ultimately, the person decided, I want to go and fight because why? I watched a video showing that there are volunteers in the world heading towards Ukraine to fight. Or maybe he didn't see that. What he watched was, he saw Ukrainians who are already stationed in other countries returning home to fight. So he decided to he is not imitating, he is modeling. Because he's not a citizen. So there is no obligation to go and fight. But he is repeating that action to a very high extent. It's called modeling. Follow? So in real life, many actions that we carry out are the result of learning. Whether it is a combination of all three learning principles or just one of them, well, that depends on you discussing with the person and breaking it down how much. Here, I'm simply using an example to show you that all three can be applied. Okay?
You attach the emotion to the reinforcement.
And why I use the emotion is because in real life, right, you find that we really don't need so much money to be reinforced. Money is good, but many times we actually do things because we have that feeling. If you look at my patient, keep bringing the son to go and see a doctor because he has some kind of OCD. But he felt a lot of relief, even though the son is not really sick, right? But maybe the son just have a brief cough because got irritated, the throat got irritated. But to him, he is so worried that the son might fall sick, he will bring the son to go and see a doctor. And it's already too much because it's like every 2-3 days, he will bring the son to go and see GP. But every time he brought the son there, he felt two things. One, relief. At least my son is safe. Actually, the son is not safe because of him. But he felt relief. And he also rewarded himself with, I'm a good father now. Although he wasn't really, right? Because he's creating a lot of problems for the kid. But that's besides the point. The point is what is happening in this person. He has a misbelief and he's acting on it. And when he acts on that belief, he fed himself. He also felt the relief, the joy, all this. So reinforcement need not come through money, through material stuff. It can be through very, very intangible things such as emotions. Yeah. Yes, I have a question also from online. Just a moment, please.
There is a question saying, can reinforcement also come as a form of altruism?
Yes, Mother Teresa did that. Right? Do I need to explain more? By the way, it's not that straightforward. Meaning, Mother Teresa has been under scrutiny. She has passed away now. But her actions and reports from witnesses have shown that it's not always that altruistic.
One extra note on the same comment. Might people do donations due to altruism?
Technically speaking, altruism should be considered as a you win, I lose kind of situation. All right? So in psychology, we distinguish between altruism, acts of benevolence. So benevolence can be win-win, donation. I donate, I feel good. You take my money, you will prosper. Good. Altruism is usually limited to maybe let's say I'm a soldier patrolling Ukraine, and then I see an unexploded grenade left behind by the Russian, and a little girl is maybe nearby. So I run over, but it's too late. So I jump onto the grenade exploded. So I will die, right? So in this case, I lose, you win, because the girl will be saved. So that would be considered real, valid altruism. So I'm saying this because, of course, I could say it's altruism, but that would be technically incorrect. If you are doing donation, most of the time it is benevolence. All right? You can argue that, oh, but then I will have less spending power, but that depends. You notice some companies, they make a lot of donation, but after that they make even more money. So we don't really know, just to make it very clear, all right, if we go along the lines of benevolence, it's correct that donation would lead to a I win, you win kind of ending. So in that case, there is also the feel-good part. So there is both reinforcement going on. There is also the fulfillment of benevolence. All right. So everything is now on the correct track of being explained. In real life, of course, we will use the word sweepingly. Just in case you get confused when you read more technical stuff, that's how it's supposed to be like. Any more questions from online? That's one, right?
Yes.
Yes, Stephanie.
I just wanted to ask, like, so a person's personality and a person's way of decision, it's all the things that we're learning all together, whether is it the way the brain is and all this different reinforcement and all the different learnings it has gone through.
Of course, it's the way the brain is. The only thing is you must know that the brain is plastic, meaning it can change over time.
Yeah.
So whilst you're born with certain personalities to a large extent is inherited. It's not that there is a gene coding the personality, but there are certain genes that, for example, make you feel that will not allow you to, let's say you are a person and you have inherited a particular gene that you will not be able to produce so much serotonin like normal person. So now you have a tendency to be feeling sad and depressed much more easily than others. So the personality code is not something that codes you to be a depressive personality person. It codes you where you are unable to experience bliss and contentment compared to another person because you will have less serotonin to start this kind of experience for you deep down. But being inclined towards sadness, after you go through the same life event with others, you learn. So in watching a video of how Ukraine got bombed, someone like me might be very numb to it. Oh, it's just bombing. Someone like you may be, oh my God, it's so painful. Because you're unable to generate more serotonin. And I'm not implying that I have more serotonin than you. Okay?
So then what does this the social learning and all the different pre-learnings and the reinforcements like throughout your lifetime, how does that impact also your decision making?
Well, that would be too long an answer to give.
But it does cause an
It does. All three will have an impact. How much? Well, then different people have different life experiences. So of course, all this will you have to ask the person on a case-by-case basis. Yeah.
This is what you're trying to say, the foundation is still the chemical first. Then on top, the other layers are all this behavior.
They shape the chemicals. Only thing now is we are not so sure about the original picture. Because it seems like human mind and animal minds are not so the same. Whilst we need the chemicals in the brain in order to accumulate information, it seems like we are also capable of stimulating further neuronal growth. All right. So two people experiencing the same thing, they can go off from the situation with very different meaning, very different forms of learning, and very, very different motivation to act based on that information. Whereas animals are closer. If you throw them, let's say a snake, you throw a cat into a cage with a snake and it got scared, you throw another cat into they will still first run, then fight back. Okay? But for us, we have very different. Some people may even see the snake, right, and they meditate first. This is not even natural instinct. Okay? Question? All right, now, so I mentioned about vicarious reinforcement. I didn't want to go deep into it, but I left you some notes to read. Basically, watching a reinforcement occur gives almost the same impact as when you go through it yourself. So that's why a lot of people watching the Sheng Siong show are so happy. Somebody else is winning the $1,000, 1,000 times more money than they should. All right, but you find that those viewers at home, right, they clap and roar and cheer together with the winner of the cash, because they are all under this vicarious reinforcement. It seems possible in humans and some monkeys because we all have something called mirror neurons. So certain organisms evolve in parts of their brain, right? Some neurons where it will fire the moment we imagine or we witness something, and they fire in synchrony with whatever we are observing. So vicarious reinforcement works well. And of course, all this has an impact on what? Whether you, this part, right? Why are we able to imitate people? And because when we are modeling, imitating, one of the key things is that we usually model after people who are successful. Notice? And this actually is a mechanism that we have evolved where we don't have to go through every experience ourselves. We model. So when we model, especially modeling after successful people, we increase our problem-solving ability. This thing called self-efficacy. At this point in time, I want to highlight your problem-solving ability is called your efficacy, but self-efficacy is closer to what? Your perception of whether you will generate the correct solution. So you may not have that solution, but if you model after someone, right, you will believe that sooner or later I will get it right because it's already been done before. So all these things that has come together, that has come to us through evolution, they are there because they help us to survive. Okay, the three learning principles won't go away because it has been with us and it helped us to survive. So it's hardwired in. Why do we model? Some people try to explain it is because it will improve our perception that we will struggle and find a solution. All right, so I will leave you a video like it's a summary thing. So you can watch this yourself. It's a summary of all this that we've talked about. So when you go back and watch the video, this last one is about classical and operant conditioning. Okay? All right. That's it. Any question? 7 has about 2 parts. We will just be clearing one part of it. Is next week the second lesson or the last one? Last one, okay.
There is a
Yeah.
question. When will you be sending the mock test papers?
Next week. It will come with the answer. So yeah, because I wanted to run through in class next week, but if it's last, that means somehow I must have been answering too many questions. So, so we can't be running through in class. So I will just email you the mock paper. So it comes with the answers, and then you cover it first. You do, and after you look at the answers. All right. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay. Oh, maybe I didn't click properly. Okay, so let's define first. What is personality? Where is the definition? Okay, take a look at this. Personality are what we call TRAITs, traits. So they are characteristics. Yes. They are characteristics where they influence our decision making, our actions, and the way we feel. So these are inborn characteristics, right, which influence the way we act, the way we think, the way we feel. And these characteristics are relatively permanent. So meaning they can change, of course, but it's not easy to change. So for example, research has shown that if you measure the person's personality and you measure it 6 years again, after 6 years, right, you measure it again, then you want to look at how much has changed. So for people, the greatest level of change is what happened during adolescent period. Otherwise, right, it tends to be pretty stable. Like for example, at 50 years old, right, so you measure people at 50 years old, then you measure again at 56, assuming they are still alive. You find that about 49% of their personality characteristics will remain unchanged, which is a lot. Like half of your personality is not likely to change. The way you do things, to us, we just sweepingly call it habits, but actually your brain is hardwired to just repeat those things, or at least the principles of doing certain things. And the older you get, the less likely you will change. But there is a percentage of change. So when you watch those movies, right? So let's debunk some movies first. Sometimes you watch movie, maybe the girl will tell the guy, but if you love me, you wouldn't try to change me. Wrong, okay? You will change. In fact, change is good. Then meet each other halfway. Solid relationship. Okay, so personality can change, it's just not easy to change. And it's even been demonstrated that if people suffer from mild brain injury, so for example, they hit their head so hard, they concuss, they knock out for anywhere between 24 to 72 hours. An MRI scan show that there is actually blood clot inside, but not enough to end up with maybe half a body not moving, something like that. Even with mild brain injury, your personality will remain largely the same after you've woken up. So brain damage also won't change it. That's how robust personality is. Okay, question? All right, so personality are relatively permanent characteristics or traits that influences or guide, right, the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we act. Question? So then the next thing is, these kind of traits, are they learned or are they biological? Both. You have to first inherit them from your parents, then your learning will further sharpen them. All right? And of course, if your learning feels that you need to discard some, you will. And especially under duress or trauma, all right, you might just have a different personality, at least some will change. But when you are under duress, under trauma, more will change. But roughly, you can't run away from your entirety, okay? So, okay, we're done. Actually, we've covered a lot that I've summarized up. But I can't get these two, okay. All right. Now, this is not something new. In ancient times, people have already wanted to study this, and they did it. It's called horoscope, okay? But whether you see it as horoscope or horoscope, that is a matter of subjectivity, okay? So, why? Now let's take a look why it could be horoscope. Funny.
I asked astrologer Susan Miller to do my horoscope. Miller writes astrology columns for magazines.
Just a moment, let me check something first. Seems a bit too early for this video. Okay, never mind, continue and watch. There is something called Barnum effect in the video, which means saying something that is very general, so it's always correct, okay?
The website that's viewed 800,000 times a month. What she gave me was a chart.
Will the online people be watching this, or they actually see me flip?
Okay. So you do very well with partners, people who collaborate with you to help you.
This is what's called a cold reading, when you say so much, there's bound to be something in here that'll come true. And of course, there's plenty of flattery.
You have Venus in the 10th house, making you a very popular leader or personality? Do you want me to go on that?
So fake, right?
Form reading techniques where they say things that are true for everyone.
Those 3 planets in Pisces makes you very intuitive.
Who doesn't want to think that they're intuitive?
Can she hear me?
Say about people that
Can Rebecca
most
hear
of
me?
us think are true just about us. Like,
I think if you can type for me, it's a simple thing. The answer is generally yes, unless the person has multiple identity dissociative identity disorder.
But to the nth degree.
Then you just bracket there. It used to be called split personality. Yeah.
But I would give perhaps other people different adjectives to describe them.
to show how people fall for this, some years ago for Good Morning America, I had an astrologer do a chart on a mass murderer, Ed Kemper. Let me pass these out. Then I gave it to these students, telling them it was their horoscope. Charlotte Hunter? Would the mass murderer's horoscope capture their personality? You bet.
I don't know.
Why are you laughing? Is it accurate?
Yes.
Who is it? She already thanked us.
How many feel that this came pretty close to capturing you? Okay, I hate to
Right? So how it works, it's Barnum effect. Now, the thing is, this keeps popping up. Maybe there is really some guru out there that can see your future through a crystal ball or something like that. It's just that the person hasn't come up, volunteer for experiment to verify the feed. So, but instead, right, what we get is that we usually get this kind of thing called cold reading, warm reading and saying something very general. And apparently this works, and all this kind of lingo is embedded in all the horoscope thing. Okay? Actually, psychology is also guilty of this. That's why up to the 1950s, right, one of the reasons why Freudian way of doing things lost its popularity was because, you know, this kind of way, it tries to classify people into just, okay, let's just look at one set of horoscope. Maybe the English kind. Or better yet, the Chinese horoscope, it's represented by animals, right? And there are 12 of them. So meaning in this world, there are only 12 different personalities, or broad personalities, you could say that. But one whole year would have the same people, because it's all like, if you are in year of the dragon, you are all dragons. So I would have millions of people who are dragons. Do you really see that many people born the same year having the same kind of thinking pattern? Yeah, no. So what is wrong is that they try to classify people according to some kind of category, rather than describing their specific behavior. Now, that's not all. They only have 12 categories. Can we really have just 12 personalities? Of course, the woman said, she defended herself saying, I will use different adjectives, but the adjectives are just descriptors. Ultimately, you are still looking at the base, which is that personality. All right? So it sounds a bit far-fetched where you can actually classify everyone into just 12 personalities when there are like 6 billion of us. Secondly, psychologists, scientists have also made that mistake. Initially, when they want to move out from all this ancient stuff, right, they also categorize people. It was a tradition for the Westerners, Western psychologists, it was a tradition that dates back all the way to, I think it was ancient Greece, or is it before that? Already there were such things. In fact, it was worse. Back then, right, they didn't even have 12. So some of the indigenous tribes were actually smarter. They have 12. Some of this 12 thing, right, is date back to other civilizations. The usual European, they have only 3. And it goes by it goes by your size. If you are fat, you are one type. You are thin, you are one. You are athletic, and then that's it. So it's probably way off, and the way they do it, like Barnum, it doesn't work. So by the time we reach, so psychologists did this from 1880s all the way until 1950s, 60s. They got fed up. They found that we're just making the same mistakes as all these so-called fortune tellers. You say something very general, you get it correct, but it's not really helping anyone at all. So there was an adjustment. Instead, right, they started to look at all the specific behavioral characteristics. So let's finish in 2 minutes. Let's look at what were the mistakes. One of those key figures who promoted classification in psychology was actually Freud. So I'm going to run through all this because there's a need to debunk this. This is very famous in the internet. You go search, right? Basically, all personality studies, right? Freud's one will always pop up, leading to people thinking that, oh, this is what real psychology is. It is not. Freud started with trying to help people, but he got tired of saying that it is because of your experiences and such, or because of your learning from your parents when you were younger. Instead, right, he believed that there's something stronger influencing people. So he developed the psychoanalytic personality thing, and he called it the psychosexual theory of personality development, which was what? Which first assumed that there are two forces in you, all right, which is written in red here. But Freud then changed one of them to be what? To be sexual energy, and he relabeled it as libido. So there is, in the more older terms, is eros versus thanatos. Freud didn't drop the term thanatos, but he used it very, very rarely. Okay, he went in favor of saying that eros pushes us to do things. And he further mentioned that that in your mind, it can simply be envisioned like this. You have your which you are also born with, right? You have your id. So this id is actually all your deep-seated desires. But not all the desires are in your conscious mind. Okay?
There's a question.
Yeah.
What about those personality tests circulating in the market now? How accurate are those?
Depends. I will answer your question later, Karen. Let me finish with this first. So we have id. Now, so most people don't quite understand what Freud meant by this. This is your insatiable. Okay, if you look at, I should do my mouse here. Yeah, if you look at it, it's your insatiable, unconscious part, which has all the kinds of desires and craving, even illegal ones. But you can't act it out. So it needs to be suppressed. Now, fortunately, right, according to Freud, there's another part of you which will instinctively grow bigger and bigger as you age, which is called superego. He believed that this part contains all your altruistic drives, so all your be good thing. But then this ego is not you. It's really the result of your superego as it grows up. It is trying to even out the forces. So it's like your insatiable desire will pull you one way. Your superego will say, be kind, be self-sacrificing, etc., putting it this way. So where they come to a balancing point, this balancing point where you can now work on rationally, because you have irrationally pulling, you have overly self-sacrificial, which is no good. So the middle point is your ego. Okay, so some people thought the ego is a third part. It's really just the result of these two forces stabilizing. And then you have your whole brain this way, where you have your consciousness, what you are aware of, usually governed by your superego, and the stable part. But the ego part has a portion that is what we call in your subconscious mind. Technically, the term is preconscious, where you don't really know what's happening, but you can pay attention to it. Like most of us don't care which leg we shoot out when we walk. But if you pay attention, you know how you are actually walking. All right? So his idea is that all our deep dark desires are in the id. This will push us to crave and want for all kinds of things, but we can't, and we will stop ourselves. As we learn, we will expand on superego. All right? After all, in the end, we will rationally think of things. Then he said that, so in order for these three to work, you have all these mechanisms surviving or established in which part? in this part. Let's go back. They all exist somewhere around here. So going into superego and it, but it's all underneath the water. In other words, right, Freud proposed that somewhere in the brain, there are mechanisms that help you to stay in denial, helps you to block out anxiety by repressing it, so you somehow forget about all the pains in the world, and always trying to come up with some excuses to not to do things or do certain things to escape rationalization. So all this ability to do all this, right, is governed by the unconscious mind. Now, unfortunately, right, we never found any evidence for this. We know that sometimes people do certain things, like, when they are angry, they will find a scapegoat. But that doesn't mean that you have one portion of your brain governing how to find scapegoats. In fact, we don't believe that's happening. All right? So Freud was probably overpainting the picture. If you have to find a scapegoat, it's probably part and parcel of the end result of your thinking and information processing about some events. So all these are handled by separate parts of the brain. Yes, that we know. But it's more looking at information processing. And of course, Freud then further pushed and said that how all these mechanisms evolve, it follows your birth. Like when you were still a very young child, you will always want to seek gratification through feeding. If you are blocked, right, because maybe your family too poor, cannot afford the food or something like that, you will grow up to have problems related to your mouth. So he believed that, like for example, if a person has binge eating disorder or is an obese person, probably because the child, right, during the age of 0 to 1.5 years old, their feeding was not done properly. So eventually the child grew up to be a feeding monster and became obese. If that is not far-fetched enough, then he has another stage, right, where he ties it to toileting needs. So he said that during this period of time, 1.5 years to 3 years old, children are trained to use the toilet. So sometimes they fail to do it properly. So when they cannot, right, they become very obsessed with, let's say, cleanliness. That's why some people grow up to have this disorder called obsessive compulsive disorder. It's all because during the toileting stage, they messed up. Now, do you find this okay? And he didn't provide any evidence to support his thought. All right? Now, so that's how he actually speculated all the stages. You can go and read about it. I do suggest you read. I might have one or two questions like that for you, because this is what to highlight that you have learned this. Now, the ultimate thing to go home with is that don't fully believe what Freud himself has said. His followers later on, they corrected quite a number of things, but it could never, at this point in time, it never beat the popularity and the internet, because these things are like so juicy, so easy to understand. So it kept being circulated in the internet again and again, and even in some, like all these are untrue but popular books on folk psychology. So all these myths are being persisted. All right, but we really feel that it doesn't really happen that way. Okay, so all these slides, you can read about them. It will help you to understand the error of Freud. Mainly, I want you to focus in the end on this, that eventually there are a lot of criticisms levied against Freud for developing his theories only based on very sexist view. He is always shaping women to be like the victims. And then he never, like I said, never produced any evidence on. The only thing he had was he saw many, many patients, because by today's standards, he would be considered a medical doctor specializing in the field of psychiatry. And because he saw many patients and many patients got help by him and his so-called theories, so it seems like it worked. But we now believe that it's probably something else that worked. Like for example, he was able to strike good rapport. So the rapport actually influenced the patients to recover. Okay? So we don't have much faith in what he said due to all these criticisms. Just that his success is probably due to rapport rather than the actual knowledge and skills that work. Okay, got it? Question? So we are done with all this speculative stuff by Freud. Next time we come back, we will talk really about personality itself, which is way down, starting from here. Question? All right, I see you all next week. And Enneagram, right?
Yeah, just this personality test.
Okay, personally, I haven't reviewed the Enneagram, so I do not know. Karen, are you here? Okay. So I've seen it before, but I didn't actually review it, so I can't say for sure how accurate it is, or whether it is wait, you should be seeing me from that side or from here? I should be talking like that to you. Yeah, otherwise you'll just be looking at my ear, but I'm not talking to you like this, you know. Okay, so anyway, as I was saying, I didn't really go through the Enneagram, so I can't say for sure how accurate it is. All right, I've also not reviewed it. I can look through the scientific research on it and see how accurate it is. Now, having said that, right, if we push your question out, because the front part of the question, what about those other personality tests? A lot of them on the internet, they are not, except for something called the Big Five. The rest are probably not so valid. So Big Five has a gold standard test. It's called, its abbreviation is NEO-PI. If Sharos type for you, it will be NEO-PI. Just NEO and -PI. It actually stands for neuroticism, extraversion, and what's O? Neo and openness, I think. Okay, personality inventory. I think now it's in its third or fourth version. So what happened is this thing measures 5 types of personality. We will cover that next week. And why 5? Depending on people, but there was a study done on 5 pillars of personality traits. So rather than talking about like broad categories, like whether you are anal or oral, like what Freud did, or the horoscope says you are like Aries or something like that. So what they will do is they will literally look specifically at your one particular trait. Like, do you have a tendency to be open-minded? That means you are more inclined to accept creativity, to consider new propositions, or you are less open to such things. You need to persuade more to get you to listen to new ideas, right? So personality scales nowadays measure this. What is your inclination? Because after all, personality influences the way you do things, all right? So there are certain gold standard ones. They are usually not released to public because all these take a lot of money. Like I talk about IQ test, it takes a lot of money to test them out, so they are not released. So most of the measurements out there, they are not very good. The Big Five is because it was mimicked after this thing, but when 2 researchers, Srivastava and John, did that many years back, they couldn't use the NEO-PI because it's copyrighted. But what they did was they wanted something similar, and they came up with a scale that is almost 80% matching. When I say 80% matching, I don't mean the wording. I mean they managed to devise a personality scale that is 80% accurate in measuring the traits investigated by NEO-PI. All right. So in the research world, 80% is actually very good already, very close to the gold standard. And they did it for free. So this thing, Big Five, is actually free. You can get it from internet. I think one of the websites actually allow you to take it, do it, and then after that you submit already, right? They will tell you where you rank with all the millions of people in the world with regards to certain personality strengths, or how strong you are displaying those traits. All right, so that's the Big Five, literally BIG space FIBE. Other than that, most of the tests are actually not valid one. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Already answered those questions.
Yeah, Louis was asking about all other profiling tools. Well, like I said, all those things on the internet for free, you should take them with a pinch of salt. The highest they go is probably around 70 to 80%, close to anything that is gold standard. And gold standards are not perfect tools also. Gold standards, right, they are, when they measure your personality, it will fluctuate according to population because of cultural differences. So generally, it is anywhere around, also around the range of 70, a bit higher, up to about 75 to about 85% accurate. So if you then look at it, right, a normal free of charge one, even if it is valid, it is only about 80% chance close. So ultimately, if you are looking at gold standards, can only reach about 85%. Therefore, all this online one, the best you can get is to get an idea about 65% true of the personality profiling of any individual. Okay, that's not really very high. That means at the end of the day, you are only going to be able to be about 2/3 of the way correct when you are understanding or predicting a person's personality. So ultimately, you still have to fall back on an interview. So, but it has always been like that. There is always an inventory that uses it, when we use it to measure. After that, right, we will interview the person, and then we will look for matching, how matching they are before we make a decision about what are some of the more prominent traits that has been found out. Okay.
Yeah, I think you already answered that.
The Treaty.com, not necessarily. There are actually, because it was free, so it was adopted by different organizations. I believe you can find John and Srivastava's Big Five in different websites and also hosted by some other companies. All right. But to be quick, I suppose if you find it on Treaty and everybody just goes there, then that should be the one. Myers-Briggs talks about they are looking at another side. There's something that conventional psychologists don't want to recognize. And there's some reason why. So I will leave it to next week. You will watch a video on it. So I will show you why the MBTI, Myers-Briggs inventory, why is it flawed? Okay. I'm answering Jermaine. Myers-Briggs test. Most people know it as MBTI. I can't remember the T, what it stands for, but offhand. Yeah, Myers-Briggs, something inventory. Sorry, got tip of tongue problem here. You give me 5 minutes, I'll probably recall it. But then, in 5 minutes, I would be at the bus stop waiting for the bus. And hopefully, you are ready to sleep. You know, we are at 10:20. Any more question? All right then. Stay tuned for the video. The video is more interesting than the way I talk about the MBTI. See you.
Good night, guys.